if you have this thought in your head of, oh, I could never raise money, or I'm not the type of person that any investor would ever be interested in investing in their business, or if I tried to raise money and someone said no, I would be devastated. If you have any voice in your head that says, oh, I know nothing about finance, I'm an artist, I'm not a finance person, I really would beg everyone to just try to put that aside and be open to the idea that maybe you could raise money.
Because if somebody goes and then they work with you, for example, you tell them something, and they talk to another lawyer, and then they say something that's contradictory. How does somebody know what to do if two lawyers offer two different opinions? Hi, everybody. This is Nat Tamars back with the Raise.com Top Capital Raiser Show, where it's my job to tease out some of the best performing habits, traits, routines, and principles from the world's best capital raisers. And today I'm really honored to have Jenny Kassan here with us. And she's an expert, an attorney, investor, and capital raising coach. So she actually has over 25 years of experience as an attorney, where she successfully helps people raise capital, and she herself has successfully funded her own personal projects 5 times. As a Yale Law School graduate, she brings a wealth of knowledge, and we're about to dig in to some of the most common things that people who potentially want to, work with her may face. Jenny, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
No, not a problem. Okay, so we just did a quick introduction, but maybe in your words, if you could, share it to the audience, I guess, how you became sort of this expert in capital raising, and just to introduce yourself in your words.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. I kind of fell into it in a weird way. So after law school, I went and worked at a nonprofit doing community economic development in a low-income community in Oakland. And I just found myself getting very passionate about supporting small business because I just saw firsthand how much they were contributing to this community. And of course, they contribute to many, many communities throughout our country. And yet they're so under-resourced. So I started to learn about this area of law called securities law, which I hadn't learned about at all in law school. And I just realized that one of the main reasons why the vast majority of businesses are so under-resourced is they know absolutely nothing about how to raise funding. It's very intimidating. It's kind of this, thing that's people think like, oh, if I'm not already rich, or if I don't, have really high paid lawyers and accountants and advisors, I can't even think about doing that. And part of the problem is securities law is very confusing and nobody understands it. I mean, I didn't even understand it, and I had gone to law school. So I decided to leave the nonprofit after 11 years and become a securities lawyer, helping small businesses, social enterprises, businesses of all kinds that didn't really have access to sort of mainstream forms of capital to raise money using tools that were available but weren't super well known, and just helping them raise money on their own terms. So I helped them design their own offering terms instead of having the investors dictate the terms.
That's very interesting. But before we double click on that, so securities law, what would you say are some of the things that illuminated securities law for you? Because in dealing with securities lawyers on my side, there are some in Canada and the US, so many different things and things that are confusing. So what would be some of the biggest illuminating moments of your securities law practice?
That's a great question. It took a long time for me to really wrap my head around securities law, to be honest with you. There's not a lot of good books out there that explain it well, although I'd say now there is, because I did write a book. But when I first started, there's really not a lot of good books that explain it well. There's not that many attorneys that really understand it, especially when you're trying to use kind of lesser known options within the law. And so I think what finally really helped me, and it sounds silly, but I finally just carefully read the law, the actual law, the 1933 Act. And I read it really carefully. And then I also read, some of the regulations, like there's something called Regulation D. And I just read them really, really carefully. And I was like, oh, okay. And then also I read some of the state laws, because state laws, sometimes the state law is going to apply. And, I should have done it sooner probably, but just finally really reading it carefully, I finally was like, okay, I'm getting this. I get how this works. I get that there's many options hidden in the law, and many lawyers only know like maybe one or two options, but there's so many. There's many. Under securities law, there's many different choices that you have of how to raise money in a way that's legally compliant, but allows you to reach the investors you want to reach. And then, of course, more recently, new laws have gone into effect that added to those options.
Would you say that securities law is like, where does it sit? Because there's divorce law, there's family law, there's insurance law, probably there's even crypto law and everything. So even now there's AI law, or whatever that means. So what would you say, where do you say securities law sits in the castle? Is it like the king of the castle, or is it like where, how important, and where does it fit in the whole world of law?
I mean, God, in our country, almost everything we do is governed by some laws, right? Like there's so much law in the US, and like securities is a tiny, tiny piece of that that governs a very specific activity. And that activity basically is raising money from people who give you money with the expectation of making a financial return. And so it's like, it's not going to touch that many people's lives, but I wish it would touch more lives, because I think more people should take advantage of the opportunity to raise money. It's very empowering. It's easier in some ways than people might think, so, and then of course, even within securities law, I would say there's whole areas of securities law that I know almost nothing about, because within securities law, there's many like subparts. Like, for example, there's this thing called a public company. This is a company that has done a registration with the Securities and Exchange Commission, has done like an IPO, listed on, a public market. There's all these laws governing public companies, and I really know nothing about that because I don't work with public companies. So, even within securities law, there's many different pieces to it.
That's what makes it's such a crazy society and civilization, right?
I know it's frustrating sometimes. I don't know what the better option would be. Like, I don't know what would be a better system, but I do get really frustrated at how hard it is for regular folks to do anything and do it without breaking the law, because the laws are so damn complicated. There's good reasons for them. Having no laws probably wouldn't be a better situation, but, I wish there was a way that we could make it more accessible for more people. And that's really been a big part of my mission, is to try to make it more clear and accessible and understandable through my book and trainings I do and things like that.
Yeah, no, and the moments where when I quickly even saw you, I was on another webinar. I quickly met you. I looked at your profile for 5 seconds. I knew that we were aligned in that respect, and that's why everyone watching this, I definitely recommend to just reach out, or just at least check out the things that she'll furnish you with in terms of the the books and free resources. But okay, so one question I have here is like, many lawyers have different interpretations of the same law. So what would somebody, because if somebody goes and then they work with you, for example, you tell them something. Maybe you don't tell them the whole picture, and because there's so many different things that could happen. And then they talk to another lawyer and then they say something that's contradictory. How does somebody know what to do if two lawyers offer two different opinions? on the same law.
Oh, God, that is so frustrating. You know, I don't have a great answer to that. I wish I did, I mean, of course, I think I'm always right. And and I'm really good about telling people when I don't know the answer or when it's a little bit there's certain things in securities law that are a little bit unclear and there's gray area. So I try to be really, really honest about when I'm certain about something and when I don't know, or when I do kind of know, but I also know that it's a little bit of a gray area. But there are other lawyers who don't do that. There are some lawyers that are embarrassed to admit when they don't know something. So I don't know, maybe just, I mean, obviously one option would be to try to ask more lawyers and see if there's a consensus, but also maybe, check your gut on whether they seem to be a little too, their ego is a little bit too fragile for them to admit when they don't know something.
Mhm.
Check your gut on whether they sound like they're being honest with you about what they do know and don't know.
Hmm.
Because a good lawyer will admit, oh, I don't know, let me look that up, or I don't know, let me refer you to another lawyer who is more of an expert on that.
Hmm. And even as you're explaining this, the way that you're coming, because we met very briefly, but not very for very long. But instantly, even in the way that you're communicating this, I feel a sense of trust and pull towards you, like a sense of trust. And in securities lawyers I worked with in the past, there are years of trust before I started working with them. So I guess, for somebody who's watching this, maybe they feel the same way, maybe they don't. How do you trust, I guess, yeah, how does somebody even come to trust a lawyer if they make an offer? For example, somebody wants to work with a lawyer, they say, oh, this would cost $10,000. Another lawyer says this would cost $100,000. How do you know if people are using fear to basically get people to buy their stuff as opposed to genuinely wanting the best interest of their clients?
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, I would definitely recommend trying to talk to as many people as possible who have worked with that lawyer. You know, do some research. Not everyone realizes this, but for example, this is probably true in every state, but definitely in California, you can go on the California bar website and look up a lawyer and see if they've had any disciplinary action. Of course, a lot of lawyers who aren't great lawyers haven't had disciplinary action. So that's not going to tell you the whole story. But just, yeah, try to do your due diligence. But I am a big believer also in trusting your gut. I mean, it doesn't always steer you right. But I think oftentimes people don't trust their gut enough. If something is telling you
Yeah.
this just doesn't feel right, even if it's a famous lawyer that everyone says is really great, if when you talk to them there's just something that feels off-putting to you or doesn't feel like a great fit, then trust that, I would say. Because a lot of lawyers, even lawyers that are very knowledgeable and very competent, sometimes it's still not a good fit because their attitude about what you're trying to do might be a little bit different from yours. I find that a lot with my clients are mostly very mission driven, wanting to do good in the world in addition to having a successful business. And there's many lawyers who don't really get that or not really committed to that.
Yeah.
And so there's often like a bit of a miscommunication. Like the entrepreneur will say, I really don't want to compromise on this thing. It's really important to me. And the lawyer will say, well, you're never going to be able to raise money unless you compromise on that. And that's not a good fit, because that's probably not true. Because in my experience, the more committed you are to your values and your mission, it's actually easier to find investors as long as you really know the right way to find the right investors and avoid the wrong ones. So a lawyer that doesn't have experience working with entrepreneurs that want to do things a little bit outside the box, not do things in the way that is kind of that mainstream model of like, oh, we just have to do whatever our investors tell us so we can maximize their return and we have to put them on the board and basically they can fire us at any time. if that doesn't feel good to you and that's what your lawyer is telling you you have to do, definitely go find another lawyer or call me, or even just look at I have a lot of like free resources that talk about, different ways that you can raise money that do not require you to do those things.
That's amazing. At this point, even I want Jenny to be my lawyer too. So, it's awesome. So, okay, you said something very interesting for the second time. You said if an investor, like instead of going to the terms of the investor and just kind of bowing to the terms of the investor and letting those terms be the deal, you're saying go to the market. Some people want to go to the market with a good deal. So, I've always had the idea of, whoever is the one willing to walk away from the negotiation is the one that has the most amount of power. So can you just, I guess, walk through how that works in the sense if somebody has like a deal, let's say they have a deal or an idea that maybe isn't that good, and they offer terms that they don't want to change. Is that still something that can be successful, or how does that work?
Yeah, the way I think about deal terms is that assuming you have a business that has the potential to be successful, and obviously that's a huge hurdle. Like we want to put that as a, like as a given.
Mhm.
And when I say successful, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh, an exit at, 100x in 7 years. But a successful business could be a business that maybe is like a neighborhood juice bar that is not making money for the first 5 years, but after 5 years, it becomes so beloved by the people in the community that it becomes profitable. And little by little, it grows 10, 20% every year. It never gets huge, it never makes more than $1 million a year in revenue, but the employees are paid well, the founder's happy, the community loves it. Like that to me is a successful business, like, and everything in between, right? But basically, the definition to me of a successful business is one that can eventually become profitable and cover its reasonable expenses. And of course, if it wants to raise money, have a little bit of extra money to pay investors one way or another. That could be through an exit, it could be through paying a debt instrument, it could be through revenue, a revenue-based debt, it could be through paying dividends on equity, something that allows you to kind of have a little extra money that can go to investors and pay them a reasonable return. And what is a reasonable return is going to vary a lot depending on the particular situation. So I had a client who was offering a 3% annual return, which most people would say that's so low, that's crazy. And it was a high risk investment. But he raised like a couple $1 million because it was such a mission-driven business. People loved the idea. They were willing to not make a really high return. And really, they knew they could easily lose all their money, which, by the way, they did. The business did not work out. The people just loved his passion and what he was trying to build. It was a grocery store in a low-income neighborhood in Oakland. So, so when I think of developing the terms, I think about, okay, what is important to you? What are your plans? How do you want this business to grow? Now let's design terms that fit with all of that. So again, like if you're a juice bar that's going to be making like never going to be making more than $1 million a year, doesn't really want to ever have an exit, then obviously you have to raise money in a way where investors can get paid without you being sold to Google. So we have to get really, really creative and really customized so that all stakeholders benefit, the investors as well as all the other stakeholders. So that's kind of how I think of terms, is something that the founder or the founding team should develop based on their realistic goals, plans, mission, etc. And then also, of course, you do want to think about, is this going to be attractive to anyone? You don't want to make it so bad that people are like, no way. And of course, the more impactful your business is going to be, the more people want your business to exist in the world, the more you can have financial returns that are not as exciting.
Yeah, and Wow. I mean, you sound like a real advocate for when somebody's choosing a lawyer, and obviously anybody can make their own decision, but I think it's important to choose somebody that's an advocate. It's almost like having an advocate that is aligned with your mission, vision, and principles. That's what I'm getting from this. And what are so okay? So I mean, we have an idea of some of the types of things that you focus on. So what are some of the people that you're ideally geared towards? So who is, because we mentioned a few example businesses. Somebody listening to this podcast and they want to work with you. Uh, who are they? What's an ideal fit? And how could they possibly get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I always say to people, I'm a really good lawyer for an entrepreneur that wants to raise money from investors outside of the venture capital model.
Mm,
So, there's this thing called the venture capital model, which is very kind of well known in the world of finance and startups. And that is, I almost feel like it's a really easy job for a lawyer to help you do that.
yeah.
And I'll tell you why that is. And some people may know this already. You can go to the National Venture Capital Association website and download all the legal documents. It's a very standard type of deal. And of course, I don't want to minimize, yes, you do need a lawyer if you're raising money that way because there's going to be all kinds of details and the devil's in the details. But it's the way investors make money is basically always going to be the same. It's through the company having very high growth and growing so big that they get acquired by a large company. Generally speaking, that's the goal, the exit. Um, and I would say my estimate is only 0.1% of the businesses in our country are really a good fit for that model because most businesses just are not on that path. Or maybe they could be on that path, but they don't really want to be on that path because it does require a lot of sacrifice. That growth imperative is very intense and not for everyone. And so if you think you are one of those very small number of businesses that can raise money that way and are venture backable, then I'm not the best lawyer for you because that's not what I specialize in. And there's tons of lawyers that do specialize in that. But if you happen to be a business that is like, you know what, I really don't want to be forced to have a big exit at all costs as quickly as possible. I really don't want my investors to be pushing me to, have this incredibly fast growth that puts so much pressure on the company and could force me to compromise on my values. So that's when you need a lawyer who understands other ways of raising money outside of that model. And people can get really confused sometimes. They don't always know when the investors they're talking to are part of the venture capital ecosystem.
Mm,
And so, some people say to me, oh, yeah, I don't think venture capital is right for me, but I want to raise money from angel groups. What they don't understand is that angel groups is part of, at least, 99% of angel groups are part of that model.
yeah.
And they're expecting to be the first step on a path where with the high growth and the exit. So if you know that that's not a right fit for you, you need to be pretty um, savvy about avoiding that model because it's going to be a waste of time and energy for you. It's not going to be the right fit for you. And people just get so confused. They'll go to these pitch competitions or angel groups and they don't realize that it's all part of that venture capital model. And if that's not a good fit for them, they're wasting their time, they're wasting everyone's
I
time.
totally agree. Uh, without getting into the rabbit hole, I definitely had my falling outs with venture capital, and now even me at Raises.com, we exclusively work in quote unquote private equity, uh, which is way bigger than venture capital. So okay, is there a deal size limits to the type of people? So let's say there's some people that maybe they're smaller or getting started, but what about people that are even more experienced? And then they hear about this podcast or they learn about your work, they'll be a good fit too, right?
Yeah, I mean, the clients I work with are generally raising anywhere from, I'd say, about 500,000 up to maybe 10 million.
Nice.
And I haven't had many clients raise, that 10 million amount. I'd say most of my clients are probably raising on average about 2 million. Um, so and it's a good fit for people who maybe have never raised before, or maybe they've raised once before, but they kind of weren't super comfortable with how they raised, and maybe they now have a bunch of safes and convertible notes, and they're like, oh my God, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's generally the size. I mean, there is I theoretically could help people raise more. There is one of the tools that is available now is Regulation A, where you can
Yeah.
raise up to 75 million. And, that fits in the sweet spot of a way to raise money if you don't want to use that venture capital model. But personally, I haven't had a client raise more than probably about 10 million.
Nice. And then a lot of the work that I've seen is people who want to buy businesses or buy real estates, via either real estate syndication or some sort of business buyouts, SPV, special purpose vehicle. So to those listening, somebody who wants to buy a business using a special company and raising money for that. Do you have many of those, or is it mostly people that want to raise money to grow their operations of their business?
Right. So I mostly have, operating businesses.
Okay.
I do also have some clients that have investment funds. I've also started an investment fund myself. So, an investment fund is basically a company whose primary activity is investing in other companies or real estate. And there are some extra rules associated with that. And there are also a lot of lawyers that specialize in those types of like a venture capital fund is basically a type of that of a fund, And
Yeah.
if you want to start a venture capital fund, there's lots of lawyers out there that are really good at that. But I have clients that want to start kind of creatively structured funds that are not venture capital funds, like maybe ones that are run out of a nonprofit that are raising money in the form of debt, or ones that are like evergreen funds where there's not any exits, and the investors get paid like an annual payment. So I like to do the more kind of out of the box funds.
Oh, nice. So then, wealth of experience here. So I guess as we wind down, like, what is, I guess, a message that you would share to just those people who are really important to you in this business? If you had just one message to share, and this message kind of is the thing that they'll remember from our conversation, from everything that you focus on in your business, what message would you share to the viewers? And then what would that message be?
I mean, I think one of the things I'm most passionate about sharing is that if you have this thought in your head of, oh, I could never raise money, or I'm not the type of person that any investor would ever be interested in investing in their business, or if I tried to raise money and someone said no, I would be devastated. If you have any voice in your head that says, oh, I know nothing about finance, I'm an artist, I'm not a finance person, I really would beg everyone to just try to put that aside and be open to the idea that maybe you could raise money. Because I've been doing this work now since 2006, and I've worked with hundreds of businesses. I've raised money myself. I was terrified the first time I went out to raise money, but I ended up raising 200,000. Um, so I just hate it when people count themselves out because they don't look like or come from the background of the people they see on the cover of Fast Company magazine or whatever. Sometimes I think the more of a outside the box person you are, the more of like a kind of freak you are, the more chance you actually do have
Hmm.
to raise money because people are looking for things that are different, that are unique, that are special, that create feelings in them, create excitement. So yeah, just that's my biggest thing is just don't count yourself out. Check out my book, check out my free resources and see, maybe I could do this. Let me consider this.
That's a beautiful message. And this has quickly become one of my favorite, among the favorite podcasts. I definitely would echo what Jenny said. Add to, I guess, add to the world. If you're different and if you have doubts, I mean, the people that created Apple, created all these rules, there are people that did all these things. People created America. So you can create something too.
Right. And we need you. Don't just do it for yourself. The world needs diverse people from all different backgrounds and different life experiences to build that thing that only you can build. So do it for the good of our country,
Yeah.
not just for yourself.
Yeah. And then the world too, I'm up here in Canada, so help us out too.
Okay, sorry, no offense. I'm very US centric, to be honest with you, because that's like I have to know the US law. So I'm like, don't talk to me about other countries. I can't deal with it.
Pretty crazy how complex it gets after when you bring in international law.
Yes.
But yeah, so Jenny, so let's furnish the viewers with a place for them to get in touch with you and what specifically they should get in touch with you about because you have some good things going on.
Yeah, so I do have some resources on my law firm website, which is just jennykassan.com, my name.com. There's a bunch of resources. You can also find my book anywhere you buy books. It's called Raise Capital on Your Own Terms, How to Fund Your Business Without Selling Your Soul. Um, yeah, and I'm working on a bunch of initiatives. Right now, I'm actually raising money for a place-based ecosystem building project to help people raise capital. And it's in Baltimore, Maryland. And so if anyone's who's watching is interested in what's happening in Baltimore or just interested in how we build the ecosystem to support entrepreneurs who may not always be the typical ones that have easy access to capital, I'd love to talk about that as well. We're building it right now in Baltimore, but we'd love to bring it to other places as well as soon as we prove our model in
Awesome,
Baltimore.
awesome. Everyone, this has been Jenny. Genuinely one of my favorite podcasts. Fantastic. The resources will be in the show notes and the notes below. And any last statements before we go home for today? For the show.
Oh, just, thank you so much for interviewing me, and it's been a pleasure, and I love the work that you're doing, and let's just, yeah, keep doing that, getting the word out.
Absolutely. Everyone, check out Jenny's resources. It'll be in the show notes. Click on the website. Check out if you know anybody interested in their sector. Feel free to reach out. And this has been the Raise.com Top Capital Raiser Show, everybody. Have a good evening. Cheers.